Tilder! What is this? This is the Neewer 1x2 LED mat. How much does it cost? Approximately $110. It's daylight only, has about 1,000 lux at 6 feet away, has about 3,280 lux at 3 feet away. It can't be powered by traditional filmmaking batteries like MPFs or V-mount, but you can power it with 24-volt, 5-amp LED strip batteries or using a pure sine camping generator. It's light enough so that you can tape to the walls. Do I recommend it? Yes. This is a great entry-level LED mat that will not only compact your overall kit when you're traveling, but it provides a decent amount of light for most filming situations, especially if you're an indie filmmaker that is filming in tight quarters. Done! Roll that intro! What's going on, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we're constantly and always still learning. So today we're going to find out whether or not this 1x2 LED panel made by Neewer is going to be the right solution for you and your overall filmmaking lighting kit. Now this thing comes in at approximately $110, but there is a $10 coupon on Amazon currently, so you could snag this light for $100. Inside you're going to get a case, an aluminum frame that you can assemble or disassemble, diffusion cloth, wireless remote, a handle that doesn't really serve a useful purpose, and a power brick. In terms of the LED mat, this is not like a super soft, flexible LED mat that's like a blanket or something like that. I wouldn't recommend you folding this all over the place. And that's simply because it is a little stiff, and I think it's because of how the LEDs are actually mounted into this LED mat. It seems like there's a really thin layer of metal, and I think this is to help diffuse the heat as well as carry the voltage and electricity to each LED diode. Now this is a daylight only mat, and that could be a pro or a con depending on what your needs is, because with it being daylight only, you get an insane amount of power out of the 48-watt draw. So here it is against my GVM 50RS. As you can see, it's pretty much lighting up that wall at 6 feet away, f2.8 on a micro four thirds sensor, ISO 400. And as we keep going down and down and down, it's gonna take approximately 3 to 4 stops to get it at that IRE 50 level. So I'm pretty happy that this thing can generate a good amount of light where you need it. And because it is a flood beam, it is going to splash that light instead of spot it down. As far as flicker goes, pretty much like every LED panel these days, there is no flicker because they're using pulse width modulation that's pulsing at an insanely fast rate. So the only way you're ever going to be able to see any sort of flicker is if you go to shutter speeds like 1/4000. That's probably when you're going to slowly start seeing it. And of course, when you get to 16,000, you're going to definitely see it. So if you're shooting at 48, shutter speed 50, shutter speed 60, you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna see that flicker. In terms of the diffusion cloth, it does do what it's supposed to do, which is to try to eliminate the multi-shadow effect that you usually get when you have an LED panel that has a bunch of LED diodes in it. But if you wanted to put out a soft light like a traditional softbox like I show here, now this softbox, the Philips LED light bulbs are probably sitting, I would say about 16 inches away from the front diffusion cloth. So that's how it's able to give a nice soft light. If you put the LED panel at the exact same area or the exact same spot where that diffusion cloth is on the softbox, you'll notice that yes, I do get a huge blast of light, making it more powerful, but it's not necessarily as soft. So if you want to achieve a similar soft look like a softbox, you're gonna have to probably break out a 5-in-1 reflector and use that little transparent material at the very center. And I would say if you place it 12, maybe 16 inches away from the LED mat, you will get a very similar result in terms of softer light. Now, the one thing that everyone loves about these LED mats is the fact that it's so small, so light, you can roll it away, pack it away, and you don't have to bring this huge case filled with LED panels. And if you're on a smaller set, you could literally mount it to the wall with some tape, and that way you don't have to bust in a light stand to try to get the light to, be where you need it to be. Also, if you do need to have the light overhead your talent, to use a C-stand and boom it over, again, you don't have a 10-pound LED panel hanging over somebody. Instead, you have this very, very light mat and it's very easy on the C-stand, and you probably don't necessarily need to have a whole bunch of sandbags to counter that weight. Now, while this LED mat is definitely an amazing value coming in at $110, are there some cons? There are, and most of the cons that I'm about to go into is just because it's a cost-saving measure. To get this type of light output in this form factor at $100, it's very, very cheap compared to its competitors. And so therefore, these are the kind of things that they had to do to ensure they come in at this price point. So the first thing is that the only way to dim this light is with a wireless remote. And you might be saying, well, wait a minute, really? Yes, that's the only way you can dim it, and sometimes the remote needs to be really close to it to actually dim it. And basically speaking, this is technically a cheaper and easier way for them to dim the light, is using some little chip that talks to something wirelessly instead of actually having a dimmer knob. So that's definitely one way that they kind of cut costs to make sure that it comes in very cheap. Now, there is no outright battery option to power it with, let's say, an NPF battery, but there are ways that you can go portable with this thing, whether you're using a battery generator with a pure sine wave, or you could use some LED strip batteries, and specifically you're going to have to get the 24-volt version, not the 12-volt version. And that's just simply because if you look at the spec sheets, this is using 24 volts instead of 12. Now, instead of it coming with this weird handle thing that doesn't necessarily serve any sort of purpose, I would say that it would be nice if Neewer would include just a simple ball head mount like I have here. This allows me to mount it on a stand very easily, and of course I can articulate the LED panel and face it wherever it is that I need light. So what's the bottom line here? Is this Neewer panel something that I would actually recommend for your filmmaking kit? And I have to say yes with a little bit of no, but I'm heavily saying yes. And the reason I'm saying it is because at $110, it's basically on par with LED panels in terms of pricing. But you're getting a whole lot of benefits by using the LED matte style. So it's not going to be as heavy as a traditional LED panel, and because it packs down to such a small footprint, you can bring a whole bunch of these without breaking a sweat. And that is something that's obviously very, very handy, especially if you need a whole bunch of these lights. And they do have a smaller version of this if you don't need the 1x2 panel. That one comes in at approximately $60-some. And again, because it's so light, you have to think about it this way. You don't necessarily have to bring a whole bunch of heavy-duty stands to handle your LED panel. Some cheaper LED stands, maybe a C stand to boom over, what have you, you don't need to bring, heavy-duty stands with a bunch of sandbags at the same time. Because again, it's so light, you can mount it anywhere. Speaking of mounting it anywhere, again, if you're in a very small area and you do need to blast light from somewhere, you can tape it to the ceiling, you can tape it to the wall, you can use 3M Velcro strips if you want to utilize the Velcro that's already on the light. You can do all these things to really get that light as far away as possible from that small set so that you're not trying to frame something that's super tiny. You can basically have a lot more flexibility that way. Now, in terms of the little bit of no's, I do hear some of you saying, well, because it's not bicolor, this is a problem. And I get that. As a narrative filmmaker, I would like to have the option of having bicolored with my LED panels these days. However, I do have to step back a little bit because I don't necessarily use the tungsten on my bicolored at all, really. I use it very rarely. I generally use daylight because tungsten bulbs are pretty much all over the place in terms of the sets that I'm on. So I'm a big fan of using color contrast. So if I have my foreground object lit with daylight, but the background is lit with tungsten, then that gives the warm background in the back, and then my person in the front is still technically exposed correctly, but I get that nice color contrast. And of course, I can use it vice versa if I want the background to be really cold, but the foreground object to be really warm, so I can switch that around. I totally get that. But that's a stylistic thing that I do sometimes, and again, it really depends on if I actually need it for the film. But let's say you do a bunch of corporate interviews. The same concept is there. If you're going to be doing an interview at someone's home and they have a bunch of tungsten in the background, it's not a bad thing. That's going to give your image more pop. The foreground person that's talking is going to pop out more because of it. But if you really, really, really need to have everything lit with tungsten to match the background, you could go the CTO gel route. I know a lot of people probably don't do that as often these days because of RGB and all these bicolored LED panels, but that is one way to go about it if you want to save a couple bucks. Now, the last little con that you can think of is that it can't be readily portable with Sony NP-F batteries. And this is definitely a problem if you have a whole bunch of Sony NP-F batteries already. If you don't, and this is your first lighting kit, then you could use, again, the 24-volt LED strip power banks. You got to make sure it has at least 6 amps of current, or you could start investing in a bunch of camping batteries to potentially light 1, 2, even up to 3 of these LED lights for well over an hour, depending on what size of camping battery you get. Remember, if you go that route, you do need to make sure that the battery bank is a pure sine wave and that it handles at least 200 watts, especially if you're going to be powering 3 of these. And hey, that is it for this week, everybody. If this video has made all the influence in your purchasing decisions, I would truly appreciate it if you check out my Amazon affiliate links down below. Again, this costs nothing extra to you. It just gives me a little compensation so I can continue making videos like this for you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave it down below. I will get to them as fast as I can. And until then, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.